What up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fulfillment Podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, this is a space where we love to talk about ways that us as men can find fulfillment in our lives regardless of our circumstances. In this episode, I sit down and talk to my good friend and mentor, Sione Pouha. Sione has a lifetime worth of experience in leadership, and in this episode, we sit down and talk about ways that we can be better leaders as men. In whatever circle of influence that you have, whether that be at work or at school or as a coach, as a teacher, whatever the case may be, I hope that you can grab the principles that we talk about in this episode and apply them into your life to be the best leader that you can be. If you enjoyed the episode, please feel free to do all the things, right? Subscribe, like, comment. In the comments section, feel free to let me know any feedback that you have for me, any topics that you think could benefit other men as far as us trying to find fulfillment. We're all in the same boat. We're all just trying to be the best men that we can be. So feel free to let me know in the comments any questions or concerns or advice, whatever the case may be. Anyway, here's the episode with Sione Pouha. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it helps you find more fulfillment in your life. We got a treat tonight. We have none other than Sione Pouha on this episode of the podcast, but I'd love to just throw out some research I did on Sione Pouha, the man. Some of your resume, as far as what's some things that you've been able to achieve in the last maybe 20 years or so, which I thought was some things I already knew. That's
kind of scary, bro.
Some things I already knew, but a few of these things I was like, okay. I didn't know you were a state champion. In high school, football state championship for East High School in '96. I believe.
Before the musical.
Okay, so way before the musical for sure. So you were a champion in high school. I'd say you're a champion in college. Played in some huge games in college. After that, you went pro. 3rd round draft pick for the New York Jets. And this is something I didn't know. I didn't realize you played for so long. Was a total of 7 or 8 years?
8 years,
8 years in the NFL. And on top of that, you played over 100 games. That's wild, bro.
Is that why I feel sore and get up slow now?
You're probably feeling all 100 games now. Huh? I thought that was impressive. A lot of people can say they played in the league. Even for 8 years, they can say they played in the league. But that next tier of athlete actually playing in games consistently every year, the longevity of having a long career in the NFL, that's way rare, way easier said than done. That's like, you're in the realm of, that's Hall of Fame quality to say that you played for that long at that high level for those many years.
Fortunate, great coaches,
you know what
great
I mean? That's wild. So as far as your coaching career, you coached at Utah, coached at Navy, and now you're at BYU. Obviously specializing in D lineman, the defensive side of the ball. With that, a lot of bowl games. Those are some very successful teams, especially at the U, Navy. You guys were doing great. And then now at BYU, I can only imagine what you guys will be doing. I bring up bowl games because I think unless you're a college athlete, you don't realize how big that is. Like, it's a big deal to go to a bowl game and be part of a program that's like a normal thing to go to a bowl game. So I say that because it kind of goes with everything else that you've gone through. You served a mission. In the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania mission.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
You became a bishop for the Bountiful 6th Ward, Tongan Ward in Bountiful. And then you also participated in teaching the gospel too. Seminary and Institute. I didn't know that. That was new to me. Seminary and Institute. Oh, and a life coach.
Life coach.
They didn't put that on Wikipedia where I found all that, or BYU's website.
You got to become
at multiple sources.
You got to get kind of significant, and so just waiting to make a big splash there.
And then recently, you're in the young single adult stake presidency.
Is
that the role?
Yes.
And then obviously you have a beautiful family. You married Katie. You guys have 4 beautiful children.
Oh yeah.
And probably playing your most important role as a father and husband.
Absolutely.
So. That's quite the resume, brother.
I get bored a lot, so I got to change from different things to one to another.
We've got the good old...
Oh, I was wondering what that jar was there
from
for.
From primary, right? From primary. We got the jar full of random popsicle sticks.
Sing the hymn, huh?
So what'll happen is I'll let you go, or I'll go first. You'll
Okay.
pick one,
All right,
you'll read
let's
it, and
do
the
it.
other person's gotta respond.
Okay, so I like that.
And these are just random questions. Okay. Okay. Here's the first one. If you were going into battle, what animal would you be and why?
Oh, if I were going into battle, what animal would I be and why? An eagle.
An eagle.
Yeah.
Why? Why an eagle?
Just the majestic nature of an eagle, right? And then I feel like eagles don't really waste too much time, right? If they're going in for the kill and grabbing something to eat, they go in and get it done. Really stealth.
Okay.
So they go in there and do their deal, still strong enough to overcome a lot of different adversities. The air raid attack is pretty significant to me. You know, people think of battle and everything's on the ground, right? But can scout out a lot of things in the sky. Can carry up to, I don't know, I'm gonna look it up, but I'm pretty sure they can pick up things really quick and easy.
You'd be Maui.
Yeah. Yes. Maui the Third in
Maui.
theaters, August
I got
2nd,
Okay.
2024. I like that. I wish I had Maui's hair. Okay. Your favorite thing to listen to right now? Oh, what do you got on the playlist?
Reggae. It's
Reggae, huh?
Reggae's always been like right now and forever and always. It's always
Right.
been on my playlist.
Now, there's different types of like different textures of reggae,
Yeah.
right? Are you like an island reggae guy, roots reggae, underground reggae?
I'm more of a
Reggaeton?
I'm no reggaeton. No, that's not me. That's not me. Sean Paul was the extent of it.
Okay, yeah.
But that was like, how long ago
Right.
have you heard of Sean Paul?
Right.
So reggae, specifically roots, I've always
Okay.
loved old school reggae.
So like the Peter Toshers,
Peter
Jimmy Cliff,
Tosh,
obviously Bob
yes.
Marley, right?
Love it. Love that whole.
How'd you like the movie?
I loved it.
Yeah?
To be honest. I mean, could have been better? Yes.
Yeah.
But I was pleasantly surprised. Surprised.
Was it because you're a film guy and you looked at more of the creation of it and the actors and lighting and all that stuff, or
Actually, I thought they did great with all that.
okay,
Like the cinema part
I like
of it.
that.
But the storyline, it's really hard to hit that with Bob Marley's life.
Yeah.
It's hard to portray that lifestyle because there's so much moving parts in what he went through. Okay. What's your biggest fear?
Wow. I've come over like circumstances that are difficult and challenging, right? But I've always had a sense to like kind of remain calm and still in those instances. And for some reason, like I just zoom out and I look at like the 360 of something that's happening, right? Like here's an example. So my son, we're living in Bountiful. My son stands up too quick and he faints, right? And it didn't look good at all, right? And he just fainted because he got up really quick. And so my wife, Katie's over there like, hey, something's happening to Bill. And then like my daughters are crying and stuff. And for some reason, my mind just goes like, it's not an out of body experience, but I just kind of zoom out, and then I'm like the most calmest person ever, right? And then obviously it was like, hey, just lift up his legs, do his deal. Things like that happened. I was at Navy one time. Ken Umatalola and I were in a hallway, and one of our defensive coordinator was going up the stairs, right? He got up too quick. I think it was, you feel like it's day number 100 in training camp. It was hot, and he was walking up the steps, and then he collapsed, right? And now, dude, the hallway's crazy. Everything's going hectic, and I just get really calm, right? And I'm standing there, and Ken's like, he's like, brother, say a prayer, right? And so me and him just stand, we lift his legs up. So I don't really have a lot of fears, and then watch your fear, come at me and all that stuff. Not a lot of things, scare me. Oh, some things that scare me, right? Turbulence on an airplane, right? But I've been following some pilots, and they talked about like the aerodynamics of frequency. But other than that, that's about it. Pretty boring. Answer to that question.
Funny. It's funny you say that because I think for me, like turbulence is one of them, but it made me think of a fear that I have. But I've come to recognize that the fears that I have everything to do with me not being in control over my situation.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So like turbulence is one of those examples where it's like, well, I literally can't do nothing.
Right.
I'm in the hands of someone else.
Right.
That is like one of my more recent scares, I think,
Right.
where I'm like fearful. I can still be calm and like assess and work through it.
Yeah.
But I'm
Things
just
that you
like,
don't have
man,
control
I don't have
of,
control over this situation, or I'm not. I'm too vulnerable right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like to feel like I'm safe. The people that I'm with are safe,
Right.
and I'd like to be able to have control over that. And so,
Like I like vulnerability, but I like vulnerability that I can kind of guide.
exactly.
Right. Like I'm willing to be vulnerable, but when I don't know where it's going,
Mm-hmm.
or I have no really control to really guide it, that can get scary.
And I don't know if that's even considered fear. Maybe that's just like a level of anxiety.
Okay,
that,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Maybe heightens my,
Yep.
I don't know, my thoughts of where I'm at in the
Yeah,
situation.
yep.
But anyway, that's probably the extent
Yep.
of my fears too. Well, speaking of fear, not fear, but speaking of how you're able to overcome that, because I think that's a great leadership quality of someone, a leader, any leader I'm following at least,
Right.
is someone who's fearless. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
They can be vulnerable, but they're fearless.
Right.
What is it about that like, where does that come from for you?
I think a leader is not fearless, but I think they're faithful. Makes sense?
Big difference.
So it's not that I don't have fear, but that my faithfulness to a particular principle or a particular strategy or approach, I have more faith in that than I do in what I don't know. Right. And so if you think about it,
flip. You're more.
yeah, I'm like, I know this exists. Like I know fear exists, but then my faith or my confidence or my competency supersedes that. Does that
Doesn't
make
allow
sense?
you to even think about that.
Doesn't allow it exists,
Yeah.
which I think is important for us to recognize that fear does exist, right? But fear on its own could be really, like, that can be heavy, right? But if you have something on the other end to say, hey, this thing is like like faith bound, it kind of oversees. You can overcome the fear because of that. I mean, you look at Peter, right? I mean, you think about it, right? These are fishermen. Like they knew what was going on. Like they've been through storms before. They knew this. They're fishermen. Like they've done this before, and so for a storm to come in that type of intensity, and for him to really look out, and they were kind of scared a little bit, right? But when he saw the Savior, his faith in him was stronger than the fears that he had in front of him. And then he asked him, "Hey, come grab me." And what really took him under is when he saw that the winds were boisterous, right? He saw that, and a little bit of doubt, a little bit of fear fed into that. But as soon as the instant that he fell down, right, the first thing that came back was what he had faith in. Right, and he reached up, right, and grabbed him. And so I feel like every leader has fear. Everybody has fear, right? Is what do you have to counter the fear, right? But if you just have fear by itself, you're kind of lonely, and that's what kind of can cause you to have anxiety. That maybe turn to different ways of coping with that fear. Some healthy, some unhealthy. But if you're, but just something to counteract that fear. Is leaders have that fear, but I think their faith and confidence and competency supersedes and oversees that fear, and what makes them look fearless.
Yeah. So anyone looking from the outside in, they see without fear, it's fearless.
Right. Well, it's the guys in the boat.
Yeah.
They saw the fearful things. Peter didn't see that, Yeah. He didn't see that. So people could say, oh yeah, it was windy and all that. Not Peter. Right. He was like, no, I don't. I see something bigger, which is the things that he had faith in.
That's interesting because in that story, if I remember right, the Savior came from a distance.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it was easy to see him at first.
Right.
And Peter was the one
because they're still trying to make out who it is.
Exactly. But I think sometimes that's where our confidence is that we need to overcome fear is, where it's like it's off in the distance, we just don't realize it. And maybe it takes us focusing more on that. Even though it's far, if we focus in on it long enough, right, we'll forget about the fear, or the fear will be a little bit less. It'll have less power over us because now our focus is.
Look at all the different things he could ask the Savior, like calm the storm, but he said, "Bid me come." Right. So all those different types of elements that they have, and I love that story because just the different distractions that he has, I can apply that to me. I can say, I got, we all have our different amounts of distractions and stuff like that. But for him to really just focus in, like you talked about, and says, "Bid me come," right? And yeah, and tons of lessons in
That's cool.
in that story.
I like that. I like that perspective. What are some other characteristics of a leader that you feel are important? If you're going to follow a leader,
Yeah.
and you've got a resume that leader's got to have, or
Yep.
specific things that they've got to have that motivate you to follow them. What are some other things that leader's got to have that you think would be valuable for you?
I think the best thing, the best way to answer that question is, what are things that leaders got to have? Instead of me looking at it that way, what have leaders done in my experience to influence me? What has drawn me to leadership qualities? And that's the reason why I came up with performance leadership and development and life coaching and all that stuff, was because, not because I went to school for leadership and stuff, but like, people have, I mean, you named the stuff that I've been a part of, teams and, going on a mission and all. Those are all because of leaders, right? Those came because of leaders. So I was able to just kind of take a little bit, principle here, principle there, put them together and say, okay, this makes sense for me. And hopefully I can duplicate that as a leader. But for me, leadership is really three things. And we think they all sound the same, but they're all different in the way that I've defined them. And I call it the triple L effect. So one is leader, and leader as a person, a noun. So it's possessive, something that a leader has. And so if I can work on the leader as a noun, what happens is I increase my influence and I increase my trust with the people, like, because they look at me as a leader, as a person. Second one is leading. So leading is a verb, action, right? So how can I lead people to do something or elevate their action? How can I move them along in terms of lead, like a verb, an action,
Motivating them to act.
Elevating, motivating them to act, motivating them to become better. And then the third part is leadership, which is stewardship over a culture. So as a leader, you have the stewardship to create the right type of culture in either a group or team or family. You're responsible for the culture. Like, how do you do that? And so for me, there are three different elements. Now, you talked about, what are things that you look for in a leader? For me, it's three things. When I think about the leader as a noun, okay, number one is connection. Like a leader who's really able to connect with you. There's an author who once said, one of Jesus's greatest trait about connecting with people was he came from a place of love, care, and concern. So as a leader connects, okay, one of the most important thing is a leader got to just come raw, man. Don't come with no like, oh yeah, I know this person. Yeah, I know your histories. Like just give them a clean slate, man. And you're able to connect with them in a better way. You're able to talk with them in such a with a clear slate, and then that relationship develops there with connection. So number one, when it comes to connection, like, what are some important elements of connection? Number one is that you should always go with a clean slate talking to someone, right?
What's an example of a leader who maybe needs to work on that, who maybe doesn't? What does that not look like? Because I feel like that's probably easier to recognize when someone is doing it wrong. You know what I mean? Because the first thing that comes to my mind is, it's like you're looking down at them, where it's like, I've already done what you're doing. Just do what I do, and we'll work through it. Lead,
Well, I look at the example of Jesus Christ, what he does for people, right? Whether it be, the woman at the well, whether it be a soldier and his daughter that's sick, or anybody, right? The way he approached them was fully and completely. So you bring the complete leader out. Whenever we want to connect with someone and we have different thoughts about, someone, or we kind of already draw up a conclusion about them, you take an incomplete self to that person.
Yeah.
Because you've left all those other genuine elements that you have as a leader, you left those back. Because you said, okay, they don't deserve this. They only deserve this much of my time, or this and that and this and that. And so you bring an incomplete self to the relationship. And so now you've limited your connection with them, right? And so that's one of the things, is that as you, with any kind of relationship and as a leader, you should be a great connector. And a great connector is someone that always comes from a place of love, care, and concern. To say, hey, here I am, regardless of whatever happens. And my wife knows this as well. Like, I don't like to know anything about nobody. So
unless you learn it yourself.
Yeah, my first experience is with you, bro. Right. Yep. And even with that, if I learn something that might be a little bit different, I just say, oh, that's what makes us beautiful, is our differences that we have. And so number one, in terms of connection, is to come from a place of love, care, and concern. Second part of connection, empathy. right? Oh, I love empathy. And empathy and sympathy are two different things. Brene Brown does a great job at describing what empathy is. She talks about it. It says feeling, not feeling for someone, but feeling with someone. Right. So a lot of times you go, oh, dude, I feel so bad for that person. Right.
Yeah.
But can you, in a way, feel bad with someone?
Yeah.
To say, yo, I've never been in that situation, but I bet that this is such a terrible moment or experience for you.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to be here to listen. And she has a great, Brene Brown, she has a great YouTube video that talks about it. And if anybody gets a chance, put in the link. I think it's so helpful.
Okay.
So one is really, and I call it the check yourself. So if you want to connect with someone, first, check yourself. Meaning make sure that all your feelings and all that stuff, false pretense and all that stuff, like wipe that off the slate. That's
Which is
number
step one.
Yeah, step
the
one.
Previous, right?
Yeah.
With leading.
Yeah.
With connecting.
With
right?
connecting.
You should have already done that
Right.
to have empathy.
So this all goes in the noun, the leader part,
Yep.
right? So number one is connection. So how do we connect with people? Number one, come from a place of love, care, and concern. Number two, come with a sense of empathy. Understanding that everybody's story is going to be different. It's not like yours, right? Even though you might be sitting on the sunny side of the mountain, right? They might be in a storm on the other side, but having empathy with people, not feeling for them, but feeling with them, right? Could you imagine that? Like someone just coming and feeling with you, like if you're having a bad day, not saying, oh yeah, you had a bad.
Yeah.
And again, the video that Brene Brown has is super awesome at explaining that. And then the third part is listening. Just really listening. And has this been anything that I've come up on my own? No, it's the way that leaders have led me.
Yeah.
I've been attracted to leaders who have had a connection with me. I've been able to run through walls because of a connection with a coach, right? Someone that has empathized with me. People that have also listened. So there's a gazillion attributes of a great leader, but these are the three that I feel like, hey, if you can master these three things, you're well on your way, man.
Yeah. Who is a leader? Obviously, you said you had a lot of leaders that you've come across in your life.
Yep.
Who's the one that sticks out to you at this part of your life where you've really been able to rely on and look to? It could be someone in the past where you've relied on what you've experienced from them, or maybe a new leader that you've come across lately. But who's up there right now that's been kind of on the forefront of your mind?
And you know what? Let me finish the other two parts of the leader, and then I'll describe it. Right.
Yeah.
So number one is connection. You really got to connect with people. The second one is character, right? And so for people to really say, dude, like that person has great influence on me. Number one, because they connect with me. The second one is because they have a great character. And so a lot of different characteristics that we have, right? But one is like the one that I just kind of just redefine what character is just integrity. Just say where you're going to be. Like just be where you say you're going to be and do what you say you're going to do, right? Someone that can be just trust and dependable. And then the third element to that is competency. Someone who knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
All right. Someone who's like, oh yeah, he know if there's a leader in football, okay, he knows what he's talking about. Or there's a leader in church, right? They know what they're talking about. In family, they know what they're talking about. So those three elements are super important. For mission presidents, for me, to coaches, to family members. My dad will always be, a pivotal leader for me, and it's because of all those three things. He wasn't a really decorated guy, but he had great character. He like all I remember was him always going to his church appointments, his interviews. If he said he was going to do something, he was going to do it, right? And really not a lot of fanfare about it. And so that's one thing I loved about his competency or about his character was he was going to be where he was going to be. And we lived down the street from the ward, and he served as a bishop. And I just remember him just going back and forth, going to appointments, coming back, right? So I knew it was like, okay, if he said yes, then yes is a yes, right? So he was someone that was really influential. Well, you talk about, competency. I mean, there's tons of people who are competent in what they do, whether it be Ken Umatalolo or, Kalani or, just people who understand their field and they can teach you and learn things. My mission president, Hans Cooney, was a really competent guy. Any gospel questions that I had, I always turned to him. And he had just a really elegant and simple way of explaining gospel principles that I I was like, wow, he really knows what he's talking
And that's
about.
hard to do.
Yeah, because you can really go into the universe with a lot of different topics, right? But for his ability to be able to kind of hone it in and say competency is in simplicity, right? And so I mean, there's a vast number of people that are just great leaders for me. And again, they either have the attribute of connection, character, or competency in one of those three.
That's awesome. I think competency is super underrated. I think that's something that I'm definitely trying to work on. I mean, we talked about it before, but trying to communicate, I feel like communication is a good sign of someone being competent,
Right.
or not. Like you can tell how competent someone is about a subject,
Right.
Depending on how they communicate that subject.
Right. And competency is not like, hey, I'm a hard drive, right? Like I know all this stuff. I have all these facts. Competency is the ability to connect that person with understanding of the context or the content that you have, right? Can you make it go like this for them, just like they did for you? And so you could do that as a teacher. You could do it in discussion. You have to take a lot of time to really understand how they're wired and how they understand different concepts, and then saying, okay, I can connect it here, I can connect it here. That's why the Savior was he was so competent. He knew the crowds he was talking to. He knew if it was a parable. He knew if it had to be a reference to something that they understood or related to. He could paint a picture, simplicity. Like there's just these different types of algorithms that he used to be able to say, okay, I want you to have the light that I have, that I possess, right? And so,
but I'm going to teach it to you in the way that makes
sense
for you.
I'm going to teach it to you so that you can leave off with your own flame of fire and then do that for others. So competency is way more than just, hey, this is what I get, and I'll just give a dissertation about.
Yeah.
It's saying, hey, I understand this concept really well. I want to help you to understand it just as much, if not master it, better than I am.
Yeah. My mission president would always tell us that you don't know something well enough unless you can teach what you know to a 6-year-old. Right. In primary. If you can teach that to a primary kid in a very simple way, you can teach it to anyone.
Exactly.
And it's going to be hard for them to misunderstand you.
Exactly. Because a lot of times we get too much into the detail and of context and information, right? And we get so data driven and we get so information driven that we forget that competency is about people driven. You're trying to drive people. You're not trying to drive the fact that, hey, I understand this concept really well and I could talk, around it and stuff like that. But it's to drive people.
It's interesting because that's when it comes to leadership, I'm always thinking about someone who's outward.
Yeah.
And when you think about competency and someone who's just dumping information into their mind all the time and not being able to share it in a competent way.
Yeah.
That's very inward.
Yeah.
That's very just them having all the information, but not being able to share it. And I think that's what takes your information to the next level, is when you can share it in a way that can motivate people to act on what you're sharing.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
I kind of compare it with like a thumb drive and then a computer. Let's say a thumb drive and a computer both have, I guess, 1 terabyte, right, of storage. They both have the same storage. They can both store the same things. The only difference is a computer has a processor, meaning they can distribute it and they could use it to build applications, to build your resume, to build different things. And so the processing is the part of competency that's such a skill and such an art. And it's nothing that you're born with. You just continue to keep practicing. With your neighbors or with anybody else. You just, okay, like, how can I connect them to the information to drive people?
I would say that's the same with all the other characteristics of a good leader then, right? It's even if you're not necessarily born with leadership qualities, would you say every single one of those qualities you can learn and practice over a long period of time?
You learn and practice.
And become a leader.
It is. Yep. And I've kind of created like a blueprint for leadership, and it's not to say that it's the one type of leadership. I'm just saying that it's just kind of evolved from the information and from my experiences with these are the things that have kind of driven me. And anybody can come up with like their own like blueprint. Just have something consistent. Right. Just have like an A, B, and C to this, A, B, and C to that. And if you can master those, you'll be way better than trying to be mediocre at a lot of different plethora arrays of what leadership is.
I know you've coached specifically the D line. Over you've played the position, you've coached the position, and you've done it at every single level, from little league to NFL. I feel like there's a specific type of a leader that you have to be when it comes to coaching these guys, because they're in the trenches. They're like, they're literally doing all the heavy lifting. Right. O lineman, D lineman, by far, that's where it gets ugly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When it comes to football. For you, what are you looking for in a defensive lineman when you need someone to be your alpha?
Okay.
When it comes to your group of D linemen, obviously you're the alpha of you're the leader of your squad, your position group. But I would assume it's more effective as a leader to find another leader that can echo you as a leader in your group. Right. How do you foster that as far as your little defensive lineman group?
Yeah. So this comes back to, how do you foster that? You talked about alpha and stuff like that. You foster that by building the culture. And here's how we get to leadership. So as a leader, you got to be able to build, the greenhouse, which is the culture. And I refer to it as greenhouse because as an architect of a greenhouse, what happens is, they build this greenhouse. They have the right tint on the greenhouses. They have the right irrigation. They have the right watering times. And so what happens is an engineer of someone who's building a greenhouse, the reason why they're really good at it is because it's to provide the right environment for the best strawberries to grow, right? Or the best whatever plant they have in that greenhouse. Not every greenhouse is the same either, right? I can't get a greenhouse for one type of plant and expect another plant to grow there. But I just want this. I've constructed this in a way where the best strawberries will grow here. If that makes sense, right? It's the same thing with the stewardship of leadership, right? Being a steward of building the culture is you've got to be able to construct the right tent, the right irrigation, the right water, the right soil, the right, like everything you got to construct so that you can have the best possible alpha or whatever group you're like to provide that environment for the best alpha to grow in there. And so how do you do that, right? You've got to have a couple principles, right? And so number one is you've got to have a vision. So for a leader to build a culture, you got to have what is your vision, right? The good word tells us where there's no vision, the people perish, right? So what is the vision? And vision is not like, all right, I want this to be our goal, right? The vision is what do you want to become that will give us the end result, right? So instead of saying, I want a culture of championship, like I want a championship, like my vision is a championship. It's not a championship. It's something you want to become. I want to become a champion, right? So what you wanted to become. So number one, have a vision. Okay. Number two, have a couple core values that drive your culture. So what are the core values? When we talk about core values, I'm talking about like the values that mean a lot in here, not the ones on the wall, not the ones that, not my tagline or anything like that. What are the core values that we believe in? And then the third one is, I call it the process, but what you practice, promote, and permit. Right? How do you do that? And you got to do it over just
your lifestyle.
Yeah, just got to be your lifestyle. This is how we do it, right? This is how we do it. This is how we say it. Somebody should be able to walk into your culture and not have to say, hey, what are your core values? They should be able to see it and feel it. And so those are the three elements that help you as a leader create the culture of leadership. And so one, vision, two, core values, and three, what is your process? This is how we do it. This is how we say. These are things that we permit. These are things that we don't permit that happen within our culture. So whatever it is, like let's say in a family setting, right? Family setting, you can say, okay, this is our vision, right? Unity, right? We're a family of unity and love. What are the things that are most important to us? Core values, kindness, charity, and giving, right? And then throughout your whole process of your whole family growing up, that's all we do. Right.
Just live that.
Just live that, right? And you're always going to make mistakes, but not only do you live that, but you try to connect the people inside the greenhouse. You try to connect them to the vision, because what happens is when you connect people to the vision, and is a great quality of what a leader does, right? A good leader can connect you with the belief, right? Let me rephrase that. A good leader can believe in you, right? And we all had leaders who believe in us, right? But a great leader can help you believe in yourself. And so if you can connect people to the vision and to the core values as a leader in building this culture, that's the most important part. It's not saying, okay, this is where we're at. Here's a list of orders and things that we got to do. But if you can connect them to the vision, the core values, and the process, and then have them take off, what happens is your culture starts to get a little bit more, it broadens, it gets bigger because people now take it and make it their own. And now you see a different flare of color in your culture. Still same vision,
overarching
still
theme.
still same core values and still same practice and process, but you've got a different texture and feel to it. You have variety. There's diversity, but still rooted in one. Now, here's kind of how I kind of put that thing together. So the Lord had a vision for what to do, right? He said, my vision, and because my vision is my glory, is to bring to pass eternal life and immortality of man. That's my vision. What are my core values? Article of faith, bro. Right? And then he has, what is our process? Well, we process that through covenants. We process that through Come Follow Me, the different type of programs, or not programs, the different type of implementation of understanding truth within the church that happens. Everything we practice, promote, and permit are all rooted in articles of faith. Everything. Everything. By the way we study the scriptures, to the type of the scriptures, to covenants, to conversion, to what we believe, all those, they're all rooted, they're all rooted to the articles of faith. And the articles of faith have one vision. And that's to get us to be like him and return to him. And so that's kind of the structure a little bit with other things that I've experienced and studied but to me, that's how it made sense.
Yeah.
So I brought it together and says, okay, this is how you can build a culture. Yeah.
I love the greenhouse analogy because I feel like you bring up a good point that you have to, and it comes back to your original definition of a leader, connection.
Yeah.
If you are not connected with those you are leading, you're building a greenhouse for strawberries when there's actually cucumbers that you need to be, catering towards.
Exactly.
And so that could be really detrimental, I think, for
Yeah.
the people you're trying to, under your stewardship.
Yeah. And if you don't understand that, like, strawberries have a different mix of blend of fertilizer than like,
you'd never
but you
know.
have to have that. Yeah, you would never know. You'd be like,
never
oh
know.
yeah, I just went to Home Depot and grabbed this stuff. But like, if you know that there's a certain grade that they have, there's a certain type of tint that they have, right? And it's because of your connection, or it's because of your competency of your connection,
True.
then you could do that, right? But a lot of times, as we talked about a little bit earlier, and I think the cameras were off, is just so much focus on the farmer and not the things that they're farming. Right. Oh yeah, I know how to do this. Right. This is my 50th season planting strawberries. I could do this. Right. But understanding, like, hey, strawberries back in the 1990s, way different than now. You know what I mean? And I kind of take that analogy for, how I kind of grew up as I coach players and coach people. I always use this analogy. I grew up in a time that I would compare to like a 1980s pickup truck. Right. Remember those back in the day? Right. We all know a 1980s truck from people who grew up back in those days. If my truck wasn't starting, right, what would I do? Call a couple friends, put that thing in neutral, right, and kickstart that battery. Yeah, push me,
that
and
button,
then boom. Yeah,
run.
once that went on, it was on. Homies was in the back of the truck, and we were going to McDonald's, going wherever we had, right, and that's all we needed. If that didn't happen, my dad would say, hey, go into the truck, find the starter. You
that.
already know, right? Tap the starter
it.
until it turned over, right? I just hope that the truck wasn't in drive or anything because I was under it, right? Antifreeze, right? It could be easily replaced by hose water, right? Just turn on the hose and put it in there. That would give me the A and B back. They have, in 1980s pickup trucks, and in that time you'd have fuse boxes, right? If you're missing a fuse, no biggie, right? You just go grab some tin foil, put it in there, and then you just power things up, and so yeah, it's making you smile. So you know what's going on, man. So
my truck is right on the border, right there.
Right on the border, right? So that's kind of the method that I kind of grew up with, right? It's I can do that. Nowadays, in terms of connecting with people and as a leader, super important to understand that I'm not dealing with pickup trucks anymore. I'm dealing with Teslas now, and so I gotta connect and have competency in a way that moves people, and not teaches people that, hey, I know how to kickstart a truck. I got to think now, like not like a mechanic would be, but for a pickup truck, but I got to think more of like an engineer now. And you have to evolve and develop yourself as a teacher to say, okay, they don't know what it's like, to be able to kickstart. And I know we say that a lot. We say, if you guys grew up in that time, well, bro, they don't grow up in that time.
They don't care.
Yeah, and they don't care, right? It's really just and I don't want to say it as an excuse. It's just what we know as a method. But if we understand, like, hey, we've got to evolve. We've got to become engineers and not so much mechanics anymore. And we've got to know that, hey, it's not about fuse boxes anymore. It's about circuit boards now.
We
right?
have to be adaptive.
We have to adapt. We have to change. We have to increase our competency. Right, we got to update our competency so that we can know, like, hey, this is how we can maximize Tesla performance, not by kicking the starter and all that stuff. That's how we. So what's the carryover? Okay, so yeah, there are two different types of automobiles. What's the carryover? It's the principle. You still got to drive on the right side of the road, right? You still got to fuel. You still got to put on your seatbelts. You still got to have a turn signal. So instead of transferring the method, transfer the principles, because they can transfer from one generation to another, but maybe the methods are probably different. So that's where we got to get, or I got to get better in saying, okay, now I got to become more of an engineer. Let's see what methods will elevate the performance of a Tesla.
That's awesome, and I think that's a really good characteristic of a good leader, is one who can adapt. That's another really good thing, because I feel like a leader can be someone who, I don't want to say a bad leader, but a leader that lacks that quality,
Right,
is someone who's very set in their ways,
right,
who is not willing to adapt. And so they try and force the strawberry to become a cucumber, because in their mind, it's always
this is
worked,
our cucumber.
right?
Yeah, this is how we do it.
But if I love that you bring that up, that a good leader is able to adapt.
Right.
Able to adapt.
And one way to do that is, as a leader, just stick to your principles, just change the methods.
Yep.
Right. And the best way to change your methods is to empathize, to listen, and have that. And look at all three of those things that we have a tendency to do as 1980s pickup trucks, right? Oh, you guys didn't grow up the way we did.
Right.
I've already come into the discussion limiting the best that I can bring, because I didn't come from a place of love caring. That's why it's so important to have a clean slate, so that you can come in and say, okay, I get it. Empathy, okay, I get it. Right, I feel with you. And then having the competency to say, okay, now we can make some movement. Now we can make, we can create a relationship where I can help you elevate at your game, instead of like, hey, back in our day we did this, I mean, that's our methods, right? But just carry the principles over, and that's something that you could always carry with you. Let's change our methods. And again, when you empathize and you listen, you can. We're adults in this generation for a reason, right? Both to teach, but also to learn as well. And the good word says, "He that teacheth by the Spirit, he that receiveth, both are edified." Both rejoice and are edified, right? And so becomes a learner and a teacher experience.
I love it. Speaking of generational changes, I know for me, that was one thing that I came across as a high school football coach. That was one of like the first things I noticed, was as a leader, I was telling myself the same thing. Such a different generation.
Yeah.
In my time, we would have done this, and this, and we would have got this result. And you kids you guys don't react the same. But it came to a point in my coaching methods where I had to look myself in the mirror and say, now what? Like, so what? If they don't react to that, then what am I going to do? Because nothing's going to change.
Right.
So as a leader, I feel like adapting could be the most valuable. It could be the one thing that you're missing.
Yeah.
Right? Because the principles work.
Yeah.
Principles are all the same. They're eternal. It's the method of adapting and applying those principles that changes.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing. When you were growing up, you had a different upbringing. It was different times as well.
Yeah.
But if you could go back to your 16-year-old self as the leader that you are now, what's some advice you would give your 16-year-old self?
Oh man, I read that question in the pre-questions, and I thought about it, right? And I just thought myself in the advice that I give myself is keep going. Keep going. At that moment, you know, being a 1980s truck, I just kind of trusted everything my parents said. Not kind of, but it was like, let's go to church on Sunday and let's do this and do that. And, you know, can't date this and I would say, you know, the typical, you know, and I wouldn't call it strict because I've kind of looked at my, my upbringing as, and I wouldn't say like a lot of freedoms. I was just selective with the things that I could and could not do. And it was based on, you know, things that were taught in my living room of, you can't do this, can't do that. That's what it looked like back then. But what I really understand now is that it was developing more for who I would become, if that makes sense, right? So I'd always think like when I was younger, I thought my freedoms were like very narrow. Right, my abilities to do things were, it was just like so focused, and you know, take care of school, take care of you know, the extracurricular activities, whether it be choir, whether it be football, and then mutual, and that was it. Like that was it. And I'd kind of like, well, you know, this person gets to do this or this group, but it was kind of like I always was narrowed. And then now later on in life, I've seen that things have become broad, and it was. And I think it was because of the construct of how I was raised, the framework that I had gave me the opportunities later in life, if that made sense. And then some instances were like, and I don't like to call it freedom, but if there's not a structure and framework in the beginning, later in life, you start to be limited. If that makes sense. Effect. It's the opposite effect.
That's very true.
And so as a 16-year-old, it wasn't like I doubted or was like rebellious or anything like that. It was just like, all right, this should work. Right. Ever since I was 12, and it was something I thought was genius from my dad. Ever since I was 12, we went to the temple every Saturday morning from when I was 12 to when I was 19.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot of baptisms.
It's a lot of baptisms, right? And I didn't quite understand why there's a JB's next to the temple, and that was one reason I went. You know, I was like, yeah, French toast, let's go, man. But, you know, one of the reasons, and part of the incentives, I didn't get it at the moment, but then I started to understand a couple of times, and as you go to the temple, there's a couple of times where I'd go things throughout a teenage life, right, different phases, where I'd find myself in the restroom, in the house, just kind of contemplating with the Lord, like, help me with this, help me with that, help me with this, help me with that, right? And I didn't know until later what that was building and what that was for. Maybe that saved me from a couple Friday nights that could have been a demise of mine. Maybe that saved me from a couple different things, but I just knew that the culture and practices that my dad was trying to do back then, now is kind of coming to full light. And I'm like, wow, that's why, right? So just the thing that I guess I would tell my 16-year-old self is like, dude, you're on the right track, bro. Like, you're good. Like just continue to keep on doing it, continue to keep trusting, because there's a lot of influences they can have as a youth and stuff like that. And I just be like, dude, just trust it, keep going, keep listening to the words of the prophets and apostles, right? Continue to honor your parents and just keep going that road. Just stay the course, man.
Yeah,
stay the course. I never imagined my life would ever be like this in terms of like just enjoyment, fulfillment, abundance with my family, my wife, my kids. I never ever thought it would be like this. But I feel it's because of the course that I was kind of trained in. So just keep going, man.
I feel like the principles, right? We come back to principles.
Yeah.
And it sounds like your parents both were, I'm assuming, were very, I mean, you used the word strict, but I'd say they were very focused in on those principles for your entire life.
Yeah.
And I think I feel like we look at it as them being very strict, but in reality, it's just them trying to focus everything, all the energy, all their priorities on those principles. Yeah. And eventually those principles become your guiding light throughout the rest of your life. And then it, like you said, it kind of opens up eventually but it all comes back to those principles, right? The foundational principles that allow you the freedom later in life that you can enjoy.
And I think it's, I kind of see it in, we're kind of experiencing that as parents right now, because when my parents were teaching me about, just think about like their vision, right? And just their broadness about this new country and stuff like that, very narrow. right? But they didn't get the exposure to the what we experienced at school with different dances, different influences, things that are happening in different ways. They just kind of stuck to that. And we're kind of doing the same as well, right? There's like different social media sites we have no clue about, right? Different ways they do things, but we're just teaching like in a principal phase as well, right? And we say, okay, we don't understand all that social media world, what's going on with like different lingos and stuff like that. And, you know, every time I try to use a lingo word, my girls kind of give me a side eye a little bit,
cringe.
right?
A little mini cringe every time,
and I'm like, dude, I'm wearing the old man hat now, you know what I mean? But it's just what I understand. Or it's what me and Katie understand, but it's also what we trust, right? Because we don't understand that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
I think that's one of the things that God has maybe given us for a reason. He gives us those eternal principles, and allows us the freedom to teach them in a way that can resonate with those who we have stewardship over. Right? For you, it'd be your children, obviously, but I feel like that's where we can still have the confidence that what we're saying is valuable to you. Take that principle and make it your own, and whatever that looks like for you, run with it. But I know the principle itself is super valuable.
Yeah.
So,
and that's Arthur C. Brooks. He wrote a book. He gave a commencement speech at BYU. A great author that I love a lot of his concept, but he talks about how from like 1 year old to about like 24, he calls that I think it's like liquid intelligence. I think. But it's when you're learning from 1 to 24, what happens is like you learn everything at an experience pace. Like, oh, wow, that's cool. Ice cream tastes like this. Or, oh, yeah, that's what it feels like to get accepted to a college and all that stuff, right? And you're kind of you're learning a lot of new things because it's like your first time experience. When you get to 25, all the way to, you know, to however long you live, he calls that like crystallized intelligence, meaning now we know the value of the information or the experiences you have. Whereas 1 through 24, you don't know the value. And so we keep teaching values and stuff like that, but they don't see it because how do I know that? That's my first time experiencing that, right? Like how do I know that? But for us, we're kind of in that older stage where now we know the value behind the information or the lesson. And so now it's just bridging those two to say, okay, 1980s truck, yeah, we get it. You know the rules and you know the shortcuts and the life hacks, but this is a one-time learner. And so if as leaders, if we can almost continue to have the patience as well to say, okay, this is their first time getting an F. This is their first time, you know, getting in this type of situation. Of course, I know the value of it because I've seen it in my own life. I've seen friends, this and that, and suspensions and this and whatever, what have you. But it's hard for them to comprehend that. Like they don't know it, if that makes sense. And for in its own right, that's why we also as leaders have to evolve too. Leaders, they evolve, and they don't evolve in principle and doctrine, but they evolve in terms of influencing, creating culture, and helping people elevate their performance.
Absolutely.
So
we as men, it's not always going to be rainbows and roses every day of our lives. We all have our challenges and trials that we go through. No one's immune to that. How, or maybe what experiences have taught you to keep those in their correct place, especially when you have like a rough day at the office and you come home and you still have your role as a father to play or a husband to play? And how are you able to separate these things, right? And make sure you're giving all your energy and the right amount of energy to where you are, being present, right? Wherever you're at.
Yeah. And I think this is one thing that I've been just trying to master as of lately. And when I say lately, like the last couple of years and stuff like that, is always maintaining your true best self at all times. And if you can do that, whatever arena you're going to be in, like you're going to give your best self to that arena rather than saying, okay, this is one hat. And I know there's different, when you talk about hats, we always think about like, I got to flip from one person to another. But when I look at it, it's like, it's more about responsibilities, right? Okay, so I'm not responsible for football here. I'm responsible for, Leilani's classes and stuff like that. But if you can just focus on becoming, on being your best self, right, and the core of what that is, then what you start to become is you start to become non-conditional. Meaning like, okay, I'm only great when it's sunny. Right? But dude, I'm great when it's sunny. I'm great when it's rainy. I'm great when it's snowing. I'm great when circumstances are at its best, and I'm my best self. Now, does that mean it's going to be easier? No, it's not going to be easy, right? But if you can just become that consistent, and we go back to character, right? If you just become that consistent character at all times,
regardless of the circumstances.
regardless of the circumstances, and I feel that like even in the worst circumstances, your best self is what's needed for that circumstance. Yep. Don't show up as the rainy Sione, dude. Yep. Right, because in that rainy Sione, everybody else is looking for an umbrella, but because I'm not the best Sione, I'm not pulling out an umbrella. But in my best self, I'll pull out an umbrella and everybody is covered, if that makes sense. Yep. So when you can continue to focus on being your best self at all times, and again, you're not going to hit it all the time, but a constant practice of that is going to make it evident more consistently throughout your life. And in whatever arena that you're at, people will look at you now as a leader and say, dude, I know no matter what, that dude is right there, right? That leader is there. That parent is there. That, that thing. And I think our parents, in a sense, have been an example of that for us, right? We don't know what the bills are, but I'm pretty sure they were stacked, right? I'm pretty sure the language barrier was a challenge for them, but we still ate, right? We still had a roof over our heads. And so then we become unconditional creatures that don't have to have the habitat of whatever the weather is going to be, right? And so I have a definition in my room. I say toughness. And the way we describe toughness in my room is performance over weather, meaning you be your best self regardless of whatever happens. And in a football sense, right, you're the same player from the beginning of the play, whether it be like 3 overtimes, whether it be like a 13-play drive, or it's their third down conversion. You just got to be the ultimate best. Where in those situations, you could become your worst. Oh, again? Yeah. Again. When in reality, what those storms need is your best version of yourself. So how do you do that, right? You create a culture and values for yourself. For me to become my best self, there's certain things that I've got to do, right? I've got to have some meditation and praying. Physically, I got to be in this part. I got to be in this shape, or I have these routines. Mentally, for me, this is what I gotta have. This is the social experiences I have to have. These are the interactions that I have to have. We learned about a conference today, right? These are the words that I have to use, right? Because you'll be your best self. There's nothing more that you can do for anybody or any environment, any profession, any surroundings that you're going to be in, rather than be your best self. If you're your best self, that's what those people get, right? Whether you be at home, whether you're at the grocery store, whether you're at work, if you're always striving to be your best self, then it becomes non-conditional. The weather doesn't matter, right? The weather doesn't matter. Who do we get that example from? The Savior. It did not matter. He was a Savior from the beginning, not when it was easy. He was a Savior from the manger. He was a Savior when he was in the wilderness. He was a Savior when he was hanging on the cross. Like, that consistency is huge. And us being the offspring of our Heavenly Father, that's in us.
We have it. Yep.
That's in us. The thing is, there's so much temperature that's around. There's so much weather changes that happen, right? And that's what comes with, like, what we see on TV, what we get on media. It has an emotional impulse on us, and then we're like, oh, that guy is like, oh, whoa, look what's going on over here, or something political. Oh, it changes our tone a little bit. But if you could just take it for what it's worth and see, I could see why people would react that way, or I could see why this event's happening, or I could see why it's raining and stuff like that. Yep. And you still become your best self. Like, you will do more for the people in that storm than you would if you were still in the boat with everyone else. Yep.
I love that.
Anyhow.
I love that. I feel like there's a big part of that is very much you need to make the decision yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than have any other person or influence tell you what you need to do. Yeah. Rather, it's all inward from you. That's where the inward part needs to take place.
And that's where the fulfillment takes part, right? It's the joy of fulfillment. And that's why I love the podcast, and that's why I love the mission, is because the purpose, like it comes from fulfillment And in a world and society that I've been, and I'm not trying to speak for anybody else, but that I've experienced, there's a difference between the consumption, that the satisfaction that comes from consumption, which we can sometimes say, oh yeah, because I have a house, because I have a car and stuff like that, to have that fulfill you. Nah, that's just enjoyment because, of a purchase of a car, purchase of home time, the first time home buyer. Like those are things that you're satisfied because of a consumption, but it's the enjoyment of a fulfillment. Meaning, if I had a house or didn't have a house, I'd be the same Happy Joe, right? Yep. We'd still go hang out wherever, right? And that right there is true character, to be able to say, okay, I don't, whatever the weather is, I'm still going to be my best self. And so as a fulfillment inside, it's non-binary, it's non-conditional.
Yeah. And I like that. I've never heard of a non-conditional. You hear of unconditional all the time, but non-conditional, I had to think about that, and I like that a lot.
Yeah. At the end of the day, like, I'm going to be my best self. But even that requires maintenance. That requires you to consistently on a daily basis, what are the things that feed your fulfillment? Now remember, not feed your consumption, right? But feed your fulfillment. Yep. 1, understanding what your identity is. 2, understanding what are the core values that I have within myself. And then 3, how do I live my life in that way? And that pattern, again, is the culture. Right? What is my vision? What are the things that are important to me? And then how do I do that on a daily basis? And that provides the fulfillment that you need. And again, you could have a house, no house, same dude.
Same.
Right? Have a car, no car, same dude, right? Yeah, have a job, no job. Of course, we'd love to have a job, right? As part of our fulfillment, if your identity is to provide, protect, and preside, right? You're going to go out there, you lose a job, oh, it's okay, I'm going to go get one, right? Because the fulfillment part and deciphering the difference between those two things.
Speaking of fulfillment, what's your jam lately? What's been helping you feel fulfilled the most lately? What's been bringing you fulfillment lately?
Yeah.
Or maybe it always has, and maybe that's just your go-to.
Empathy and listening.
Yeah.
Especially with my wife, Katie, right? As men, we feel like we understand a lot of different things. And we feel like we understand everything, but we don't, right? I don't, if that makes sense, right?
I do.
And a lot of times, what happens is that when our significant others or our wife will come up and give us a problem, right? The first thing we think about as men is let's solve the issue, let's solve the problem. Yep. But there's such a different dynamic to women where the problem doesn't need to be solved. I just need you to be a bouncing board for me to hear it. Yep. Right?
Which could be easier for us if we really think about it. Like we're making ourselves, if we just sit there and listen, it actually ends up being easier for us. But we make it more difficult.
We make it more difficult because it's the way we think, right? Yep. We think if there's a problem, there always has to be an answer, right? There's a solution. So for me, my biggest thing is continue to exercise empathy with my wife, and then I have my 2 daughters, and my really empathy. And even though I've done the development of the leadership development program and stuff like that, you can still deepen yourself in the principles and core values that you have. So for me, like empathy for me has really provided it's broadened my ability to see people more, understand people more clearly, and really understand who they are, and just be a helping hand for them. Not to solve a problem or anything, but really to be like, okay, dude, that's why they think. I was like, I could see that. Yeah. And so that's a phrase that I have always clicked in my mind, and my wife probably hears me say it a lot now, is like, dude, I could see where it come from. Yeah. Right. So there was a lady, we were at a volleyball tournament, and she says, oh, you don't use wristbands, right? I always got to scan this to come through. And then obviously it was a simple complaint that happened at the ticket counter, but then I thought in my mind, I can see where she's coming from. She's probably been to every tournament that has the wristbands, and I could see how that could be frustrating. Yeah. And so that, do you know what that does to you as a leader in terms of give you depth in terms of your empathy and understanding and listening? So that's kind of been my jam a little bit lately. Another thing about that is you learn a lot about yourself. You learn that your world can be way bigger when you take an opportunity just to sit and kind of listen. Kind of what we talked about in the different principles that we've talked about. When I started the leadership development, I almost thought it was like the keys to the castle, right? I was like, oh, I got something huge here, right? And then as I start to like coach and teach different people and apply it in my own leadership roles and responsibilities, it's really, really minute to what's really out there. So that's kind of been my jam lately. Self-improvement through routines has been kind of another jam of mine.
Just consistently doing those things.
Yeah, consistently doing those things. And I came up with this quote the other day. I'm kind of like a quote person, and Katie's the only one that listens to it because she's the only one that's like, oh yeah, good job, buddy. And then it kind of goes by the wayside. When it comes to routines and consistency, here's a quote I came up with. It's better to do a little a lot than to do a lot a little. So I've thought that about like my eating, right? Instead of overhauling and eating, just overhauling my fridge and doing stuff like that, how about if I just skip a can of soda more consistently and a lot than saying, hey, I'm just going to overthrow my whole diet and eat something that's totally foreign to me, right? Yeah. So routines, just like little, like I kind of feel a little bit like a Tim Ferriss. We're taking like little life hacks and applying them. And so routines, consistent stuff over time eventually will build up. Obviously, atomic habits and all those things. That's been kind of a jam of mine lately. So
yeah, just feeling good about that, huh?
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, I'm like trying to master like the little things to do it consistently over time.
Heck yeah.
As much as I've learned in terms of like these leadership qualities, and again, I've taught it, and I've kind of built this leadership blueprint in a way that makes sense to me. I believe everybody should have a leadership blueprint. Might not be the ones that I have. I would encourage everyone to go back, pick 3 or 4 leaders that have been really impactful for you, and write down why. And write down why those leaders were so effective to them or how they helped them. Write down those different principles and create your own like leadership blueprint. Because a lot of times we can get lost in a lot of different leadership courses here. Not that any leadership course is not good or self-coaching or anything, but you have the genuine experiences that you have for a reason. And they've crossed your path for a reason. So for you to be able to write those down and say, this person was a leader from this person was influential because of this, you write down those things and you continue to accentuate those qualities because that's how you were attracted to that person. That's how you were influenced. That's how you became fulfilled because of that. Those are the true principles that resonate with you and are authentic to you, right? Maybe some of the things that I talked about today were really relevant and people can connect with them and you could connect with them. But the most important thing is it authentic to you?
Yeah.
Right. Is it authentic to what you've experienced? Not any text or maybe even listening to this podcast and listening to me, but what resonates you? Write those things down, create your own type of blueprint and continue to teach and lead in that way, if that makes sense.
What would you say to someone who's listening to you say that? And I feel like this is more of a common thing. I don't know why, but I feel like it's a more common thing amongst not just men, but women as well, but imposter syndrome, where someone is listening to you and they're like, I really want to take that route because it resonates with me, but I also don't want to be like this Sione Pouha echo where it's like, these things really resonate with me, but I don't want someone to look at me as an imposter.
Right.
You know what I mean? What would you say to that? Even though that's completely false. That's all in our own mind.
Yep.
But I know for a fact that there's people who are watching this that have that think that.
Right.
And it doesn't just mean, I use you as an example, but they come across people who resonate with them in the leadership field.
Right.
And they want to take that route and become that type of a person, but they almost don't see themselves in that.
Right. They don't want to be.
It's an imposter. Like, that's never going to be me.
Right. Never.
What would you say to that?
Put a story behind it.
Like make it your own?
Yeah. Like connection.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, connection really resonates with me. I get it. I understand that connection is coming from a place of love, care, and concern. I understand that it's empathy. I understand that it's listening. Put a story behind it and now it becomes your own. Right. And every time I would go and I would start a class, that's how I started. I would say, hey, who have been some powerful leaders to you? And someone would say, So for instance, right, Alpha is a culture class that I've kind of put together, and I asked this group, and here's an example. So I asked this group of young men, I was like, who's an alpha to you? Like, what do you think about alpha? Who do you think of, right? So they write it down, and I was like, okay, share who are alphas. One guy, one young man was saying, my mom's an alpha because she grew up with no support. She got diagnosed with cancer. She came back, and we all were raised. We had a roof over our heads, right? And that in itself, right, is pretty powerful in itself. So to avoid imposter syndrome, the principles I'm talking about is the same, right? It's just that one is a Tesla and the other one's a 1980s truck.
Yep.
Take the principle, put your story right behind it. Right. And then that's what makes it authentic. Listening is a universal principle. How we experience it is what creates the depth of it for us.
I love that.
Right. So don't listen to my stories or don't listen to my theories or anything like that. I'm not creating no theories, and not a Nobel Prize winner. But take the principles and then put your story behind it. When was the time that you felt that you were listened to? What did that feel like? Right. And then when you go teach other people, use that same story over and over and over. Here's a quick story about connection, right? So leaders that connect. When I was in college, we got a new coach, and his name was Urban Meyer, right? Obviously, we know Urban Meyer now, but back then came from Bowling Green, and just new guy, right? We didn't quite know him. I was a junior, so I was a little bit of an upperclassman, but low, underclassman as well. Was merging into like the leadership role of our team, and just a new guy coming in. My wife's younger brother passed away in a car accident, and so I had asked for time off from a workout in the summer, and so as that workout went out in the summer, I attended to the family funeral stuff and just helped out at the home. My family had come over to bring their gifts and wanted to show their respect for my wife and for me and for the family about the passing that happened. Then I noticed a truck in the back, and it was Urban Meyer, and he started unloading sodas and stuff like that, right? Stuff that we're accustomed to. And he came and sat down, and they brought the sodas. He was sitting next to my dad, and obviously all the cultural exchanges that happened in mourning for what was happening. And then he left. Ever since that day, I felt connected to him, right? Come to find out, he called my dad and was like, hey, what do you guys culturally, what do you do? My dad said, well, we go take stuff to the home. He says, what can I bring? And my dad was like, I'll bring soda. And my dad thought he was going to bring like a couple cases. My dude went to Costco. Just unloaded, right? What does that do for me, right? For me, I was like, wow, that's connection. So he connected with me, and ever since that, whatever Urban Meyer had asked us to do as a team, I made sure that I did everything I could in my power to make sure that we were there. Team meeting, 10 minutes early, right? I'm running half gashers, dude, we was doing it. No questions asked about nothing. He asked about workouts, anything he asked for, I was like, okay, we're going to get that thing done, right? I'm all in, right? So the connection was the principle, and then that story is what I put behind the principle. So for everyone, just put a story behind it, right? And then it becomes there's a texture about it, right? There's a pulse now for the principle because you've done that. So again, difference between 1980s truck and a Tesla, same principle. Different methods and different models of applying and experiencing it. How about you? When you think leader, what do you think?
Ultimately, it always comes back to the Savior.
Yeah.
I think you can always, if you study his life enough, every single thing you shared tonight, the Savior had it.
Right.
And then some.
Right.
Right. And then you can go even deep into every single part of it.
Right.
He had it. But one of the things that I took away from tonight was when it comes to leaders, for me, I would think about specific people.
Yeah.
And then I would just think of them and their leadership skills. But I love that you've connected me more towards the principle of leadership rather than the person who was in leadership. Because those principles, now that I think about the best leaders I've had in my life, whether it be young men, coaches, business partners, whoever it is, those mentors and leaders in my life have all had those same principles,
right,
weaving through everything that I experienced with them. And
right.
that's just an eye-opener for me that I took away from tonight's interview. principles. I don't know what the phrase is, but for me right now, what's fresh is principles over people.
Yeah.
Or principle over the person.
I think what you might be thinking, it's not the position.
The position. That's exactly what it is.
Because the principles is what drives people to be their best self.
Right.
But
it's the position that kind of allows them to have a platform to spotlight the principle.
Yeah. When I think about people getting a leadership position, I don't think a leadership position is when I look at somebody's been given, oh yeah, this is a leader of this, a CEO of this, right? I don't think of it as like saying, hey, they're the leader. I just think they've just been given more responsibility,
Yep.
right? So you go from like a district manager to now regional manager, now to a area manager type deal. Hey, you just got more responsibilities, right? But in terms of how can you elevate the performance of what you've been given, again, also has another set of principles and qualities.
But I also in those with added responsibility, it also allows them to have a greater influence on the principles that they could be teaching to a bigger platform now, right? Or a higher level of leadership now.
What I've noticed in principles is if I'm not being really effective, whether it be like with my kids or my wife or in any kind of platform that I'm at, I always have something to turn to say, where's the deficiency? Right? So big time for me with my daughters right now is not my competency, it's my empathy and connection.
Yeah.
Empathy and connection does way more to them than me being competent. Say, hey, if you don't do this, this will happen. And this, like, hey, if you don't do this, right, you won't get the good grades and you won't be able to get into college and all that. Kids don't care about that.
Don't care about that right now.
Because the depth, they don't see the value yet, right? Because they're still in those early stage learning parts. But for me, what really goes a long way is connection and empathy. It'll go a long way, connection and empathy. So,
do you have an example of that? Of how you've been able to use that with your daughters specifically at the because they're in their teenage years.
Yeah, they're in their teenage years.
That's like one of the roughest times. You know what I mean, to search for empathy. And
my daughters, they do online school. And so as they do online school, it can get pretty redundant and right, they're staring at a computer and they're doing all that. My oldest daughter, she obviously, I think she gets bored fast, but man, after a while staring at a computer and learning through a computer,
anyone would get bored.
Right? Anybody can get bored. And so, I can tell her all the different times, hey, if you don't do this, you're not going to play volleyball, you won't be qualified, all the things that I understand as a crystallized intelligence person who's experienced that stuff. She has no clue, right? So I come back and I'm thinking, okay, you really got to empathize and figure out what it's like, right? Obviously, I didn't like homework, but for some reason, as you get older, you forget that you didn't like homework too, right? So I sit over there and I'm like, hey, Leilani, you got 45 minutes. She had a lot of missing assignments, right? Like she had a lot. And we get back from this volleyball trip and like, all the different things that I could tell her. But then I thought, dude, you were once in that seat. You know how it feels. And she's a way better student than I am. So I sat there and it was like 5:00. And I said, okay, Lonnie, let's do this. In 30 minutes, I want you to do as much work as you can do and high quality. That's all I want. Just work and quality for 30 minutes, right? So I go to the room, come back in 30 minutes. She's so entrenched in it. I'm like, hey, 30 minutes is up, yo. Like 30 minutes is up. And she was like, Dad, I finished over half of the assignments that I was missing because of my volleyball tournament, right? And so I said, okay, you're done. Like, no more. She goes, can I keep going? Can I keep going? So it comes 30 minutes, turns into about 50 minutes. And then about 55 minutes, I come back in. I says, I don't want nobody to do no homework anymore. Done. Put it away. Go be a kid and go do all that stuff. She finished all her assignments. And so just that approach, reinventing yourself as a competent person to get them to do their work, that's kind of been my jam.
That's cool.
Is to like recreate your delivery and your parenting based on what a Tesla model and how they do things, right? So that really just changed the reaction. Now that kind of, for me, I was thinking, I got to change her mindset about homework, right? Because if I make it grueling, it's going to be grueling and she's not going to like it. But if I can make it seem like, okay, it's not the weather, it's actually her. If she can be her best self, she'll finish the work. And she did it in 50 minutes.
That's cool.
So
I like
there's an example.
Yeah.
My whole message, especially for the vision and mission of fulfillment,
Yeah.
right, is be fulfilled to your best self. Be fulfilled to your best self, and do the maintenance on a day, whether it be a daily or weekly or monthly. Do the consistent maintenance to keep you be at your best game, at your best self. Right. Before I got here, I shaved. I made sure that I shaved my head. I wanted to be my best. Right. And those are daily maintenance. As men, we've got to do daily maintenance to make sure that we're at our best selves. Because when we're fulfilled and at our best selves as men, we give so much to society. Within our living room, within the context of our work environment, in our communities, in our church communities, when you bring your best self. But that thing happens on an individual level. You've got to do that on your own, your day when nobody's looking. That's when you've got to do that. For me personally, personal prayer, script, gospel study, right? Self meditation. I'm trying to learn like a new skill all the time, right? Just trying to challenge to reinvent yourself. If we can become, and I have a scale range from 1 to 10. If you can always maintain yourself to be like a 8, 9, or 10, right? You're going to give a lot to this world more than anything that you could think. You're going to serve people in such a rich way, and people will benefit off of your light, your 8, 9, or 10. Than anything else. So the best thing that we can do in terms of fulfillment, one, continue to daily maintenance, man. Like whatever you think it is. First of all, know what it is. Sit down and say, okay, what are things that can help me be the best person? Yeah. Right? These things, right? These things. Maybe it's a weekly phone call with mom or dad. Maybe it's, I know that you and your wife, you have those constant conversations, right? Like that's daily maintenance, man. Like daily maintenance, you need those, and you'll provide for people who aren't even watching, bro, who aren't even intently watching. They'll just be like, dude, there's something about this person. Yep. There's something about this aura. When President Thomas S. Monson passed away, obviously, they had the procession where you can go and be able to pay your last respects, right? As we were walking by, and even though he had passed on, you still felt that best self. From President, you felt it, right? It's because it's who he was striving to be all the time. If we could all be that as men, like talk about fulfillment, bro. Yeah. And it's the vision and mission of your podcast and helping us be our best selves. I know you had Ndrua here, right? He talked about different weathers that he had at his life and the things that he did to keep him to be his best self, right? And whether you're listening or not listening, that thing makes a lot of big difference, bro. So that'd be my one summary of fulfillment is do the daily maintenance that helps you be your best at all times. And again, is it going to be sunny all the time? No, it won't be. It won't be.
But you can still be your best self.
Dude, you could still be your best self, right?
I feel like there's a level of self-awareness too that has to take place.
Yeah.
And I think the maintenance allows you to be well aware of where you're at on your scale, right? If it's feeling like a 5 today, I know 100% of the time if I do these things, I could get to that 8.5, and 8.5, solid. That's a fulfilled day if I could get to that 8. Because it allows me to do things that will bring fulfillment, right?
And a lot of times when the weather gets bad, we don't have a self-awareness, but sometimes we can get into a self-indulgence.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's raining, I'll just stay in and eat cookies and, do all that stuff. But noticing that everybody else, like in your family, you're like, man, they need someone, right, to pull out the umbrella. But a lot of self-awareness on a very, you have to be humble with yourself about that self-awareness, right? Number one, so that you can learn and grow. And then number two, so that you don't become so down on yourself that you tear yourself down, if that makes sense.
You go quickly from a 5 all the way down to a 3 and a 2, and that's
right.
Not
and then the more reason too, because it's raining, right? But if you can say, hey, this is what I do, this is what I need to do to be able to get on this 5 or 8. The number one thing you could do to know that you'll always be a 9 and 10 level is know your divine identity. Know who you're a son. You're a son of a king, yo. You know what I'm saying? Like when you can get that thought, not just a thought, but if you can get that embedded in your heart, times are going to be hard. But look at the son of the king that was here 2,000 years ago, yo. Right? Like his ability to be able to do that. And for us to say, okay, I have the ability to do that too. Not be perfect, okay, but to be my best self, right? To be my best self in times of storms. What a great thing that we have leaders now that can help us, give us those. They can give us the different maintenances, right? Those are engineers that spoke on the pulpit today, yo. Yep. Those are the engineers that say, okay, do this, tweak that, go to the temple, do this, watch your words, right? Do all these different things. Those are the daily maintenance. And I think that's another reason why I'm just so appreciative of those engineers that speak.
And they're like 90 years old. So you talk about different time frames and different.
How easy it would be for them to say, hey, you guys should do this and you guys should do that. No, but they're like, no. Do the
not once do you hear them say, back in my day, this is what we
did. Back in my day, right.
This way.
But they put a story behind the principle that they know lives forever, right? That are universal, that are eternal. And they put those principles. Like words just aren't all of a sudden, and I think it was Elder Cook that spoke on words today. Elder Brassband was talking about words. Words wasn't just something that we just discovered now. Like they've been important back in the day. Now they're important now. But man, it's just some wise engineers, right? And in terms of our fulfillment, we should do that. We should pick wise engineers to say, hey, this is good. Like this helps. These are good principles that I like to follow. Yep. So,
amen,
brother.
Okay. Let's jump into these rapid fire questions.
Rapid fire.
Okay,
here we
just
go.
to finish off. Okay, we got only 8 questions. Okay. Something you've never done before that you want to try.
Skydive.
Skydiving.
I won't do it because of physics, right, and gravity, and weight and stuff. But that'd be cool.
Oh, I want to ask you why, but we're in rapid fire.
Oh, it's one word. Oh, okay.
Okay. So skydiving. Okay. An automatic mood booster for you. Go boost your mood.
Amy's Hot Fudge Sundae.
Easy. Your hype song.
Whoa. What's the situation?
Let's say you're walking out and it's you're at WrestleMania. What's the song coming out?
Battle of the Hymn of the Republic.
Okay. Who's one of your heroes?
One of my heroes.
One hero.
Not my ultimate.
Nope, just one. Just one.
My dad.
Okay. Your favorite form of rest?
Okay. I kind of have Jomo with my wife.
Jomo?
Yeah.
What is Jomo?
Jomo is the joy of missing out.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
So we'll have like a Friday night and she'll be like, what do you want to do? And I'll be like, dude, I just want a Jomo. So this is our Jomo, right? We'll pick our favorite snack, pizza, ice cream, or whatever. We'll close and lock the doors. Okay. We'll turn on Netflix and TVs. We got our phones plugged in and we just kind of scroll. We just do whatever. And just Jomo, right? When there could be like events and concerts and stuff going on, we just like to, yeah. And Jomo is not something that I can't Jomo by myself. Like, I love, that's my jam right there.
Learn something every day. What gives you confidence?
Wow, there's a lot of things that give me confidence. Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ. On a scale of 1 to 10, how self-confident are you? You had a nice little haircut. You shaved. I know it's going to be high.
On a level of 1 to 10.
1 to 10. How
confident in what?
Self-confident. Your self-confidence. How confident are you in yourself?
I'd have to say a 8.
8. Solid 8. Okay. Last question. Your favorite artist, dead or alive?
Favorite artist?
Musical artist.
Okay.
Your all-time favorite music artist, dead or alive?
Fiji.
Love it. Okay. Well, there you have it. Another episode of one that was very valuable. Appreciate you,
Appreciate you, brother,
for everything that you've been able to share tonight. I know someone out there will be able to find value from this episode, and if nothing else, I for sure did. So thank you.
I did too.
And
Love
I appreciate
you,
brother.
I appreciate you, brother.
See you on the next one.